This video will demonstrate the various security configurations for MyPBX. Take MyPBX U200 as an example. The version number is 19. For configurations of other models and versions of MyPBX, also refer to this video. There are two ways to secure the web GUI. Firstly, change the HTTP bind port. In web server, enable HTTP and change the default HTTP bind port 80 to other number. Reboot the device after the change. Log in the web interface. This time, enter a colon and the HTTP bind port following the IP address of MyPBX. In version 19, MyPBX also supports HTTPS to secure communication. We can enable it and change the bind port. Also reboot the device afterwards. Now log in with HTTPS followed by the IP address, a colon, and the bind port. Secondly, we need to change the login password. In password settings page, choose a user, for example, the admin. Enter the old password and the new one. Click Save. The page will jump to the login page. Use the new password to log in. Next, we will secure the VoIP extensions. First of all, we can change the UDP port. Enter SIP settings page. Under the general column, change the UDP port. The UDP port of IP phones must be changed also to correspond to that of the MyPBX. Password is also crucial, so we enter the extension's edit page. In version 19, the password for newly created extension is no longer pin code and extension number. A complicated and random password will be generated. You can change it to make it memorable but still complicated. A combination of uppercase and lowercase letters and numbers is recommended. Under Other Settings, we can also enable IP restriction to allow only certain IP to access this extension. In Permitted IP Address subnet mask, enter the IP address followed by the slash and the subnet mask. In this way, only the IP phone or subphone whose IP address is 192.168.5.149 can register and use this extension. You can also enter this stat to allow IP phones and softphones whose IP fall into 192.168.0 to register and use this extension. Back to General tab. Let's see the View IP Settings column. When registering remote extensions, NAT and Register Remotely need to be checked. If the extension is registered through WAN port, only Register Remotely needs to be checked. If no remote registration is required, the two options should not be checked. Before configuring firewall, it is recommended that the system backup is stored. Now we will configure the firewall step by step. Step 1. Enable firewall. Step 2. Add a common rule to allow local network access. Fill in the name and the description. In the drop-down list of protocol, choose both. And enter the port. The initial port is on the left and the end port is on the right. The end port should be equal to or larger than the initial. Then enter the IP address and subnet mask. Set the action to accept. This rule will allow MyPBX to accept UDP or TCP packets from this range. Step 3. Add common rules to allow remote network access. In IP, enter the allowed public IP address. This rule will allow MyPBX to accept packets from this public IP address. The above configuration applies to static IP address of a remote device. If the IP address is dynamic, then there's no need configuring this. But drop all should not be checked in this case. We recommend using static IP address for remote devices. Step 4. Add common rules to allow VoIP service provider to access. The ports used to contact the SIP provider is UDP 5060 and RTP 10,000 to 12,000 by default. So we need to add two rules to allow MyPBX receiving packages from providers. Allow package from UDP port first. The protocol is UDP. In both columns of port, enter 5060. In IP, enter the static IP address of service provider. The action is accept. Then allow packages from RTP. The protocol is still UDP. The port starts with 10,000 and ends with 12,000. Enter the IP address. And choose Accept. If the IP address is dynamic, we need to configure a rule to allow all RTP packages. Enter 0.0.0.0 in IP and the subnet mask. In this way, one-way voice issues can be avoided. Step 5. Block web attack from IP addresses that are not allowed. Many attacks against MyPBX are web attacks, so it is recommended that the untrusted IP address are blocked from accessing MyPBX. In protocol, choose both. Enter 80 and 80 in the port field. The IP and the subnet mask are both 0.0.0.0. Choose Drop in Action. In this way, except for the IP address that is allowed in previous steps, other IP will not be allowed to send packets to MyPBX. Step 6. Add common rules to accept the static IP range of NTP, SMTP, and POP server. SMTP is the server that sends mails. In port, enter 1 on the left and 65535 on the right. This will open all ports for SMTP server. In IP, enter the static IP address of the SMTP server. And the action is accept. Next, set up a rule for POP server, which is used to receive mails. NTP server is used for clock synchronization of MyPBX over networks. Next, set up a rule for STUN server. If the IP addresses of the above 4 servers are dynamic, no rule need to be set, but the IP blacklist rule should be kept, and drop all should be disabled. Step 7. Set up auto defense rules. In port, enter the port number. Choose the protocol. And set the rate. The rule means if certain IP is sending packets to port 8022, exceeding the rate 120 per second, MyPBX will drop the IP into the blacklist. MyPBX has 3 factual default auto defense rules, which are listed in IP blacklist. It is recommended that the 3 rules are kept. Step 8. Enable Drop All. If this option is enabled, all UDP packets or TCP connections that violate the defense rules will be dropped. Before enabling this option, please create a rule to accept local network access. After enabling Drop All, the rules of auto defense and IP blacklist will not take effect. If Drop All is not enabled, please don't remove the IP blacklist rules in case the system security hole exists. Click SIP Settings and Advanced Settings. Please keep the default No for Allow Guest option. If Yes is selected otherwise, the system will allow unauthorized users to connect and make guest call. Enter LAN settings page. The Enable SSH option is disabled by default. If no external debugging is required, please keep the default setting. We also need to change password of SSH. Enable SSH first. Then use PuTTY to log in MyPBX. Type the default username root and fill in password YS123456. Press Enter again. Next, type the command PASSWD and press Enter. Now type a new password, press Enter, and then retype the new password. When alert settings is enabled, if the device is attacked, the system will alert users via call or email. The attack modes include IP attack and web login. See IP attack first. In phone notification, choose Yes. In number, enter multiple extension numbers or external numbers. Divide the numbers with semicolon. The external number should match the dial patterns of the outbound routes. Attempt defines how many times the system will try to dial when the call is not answered. Intervals defines the interval between each attempt. Last, choose the prompt that will be played. You can customize prompts. See email notification. Enable it first. Enter the email address in the To field. If there are multiple ones, divide them by semicolon. Then enter the subject. Click Save to complete the configuration. Next, see Web Login. When logged in MyPBX web interface, entering the wrong password consecutively for 5 times will be deemed as attack. The system will ban the IP from login within 10 minutes and notify the user. The phone notification and email notification settings are the same with the IP attack alert. You can ask your VoIP or PSTN or ISDN provider to limit the credit of international calls in advance. You can also ask them to disable international calls if you do not need it. We can create an outbound route for making international calls, and the outbound route will have a password. Click Ping Settings and configure a password. Go back to the outbound route page . And in password, choose the one that was just created. Then move the extensions that will be allowed to make international calls to the selected, and select the trunks. Click Save. Use an extension that has the permission to dial an international number.
Please enter your password followed by the pound key.
Follow the prompt and enter the password.
Thank you.
The call is connected. If your provider cannot disable international calls, we can configure the rules in MyPBX site to drop all the international calls. Step 1. Create an invalid service provider trunk. In hostname/IP, enter an invalid IP address and click Save. Step 2. Create an outbound route. Select all extensions and move the invalid trunk to selected. Click Save. In this way, all international calls will be routed to this invalid trunk and be dropped directly.